Good afternoon. We are excited to present day 3 of Nehemiah and the Law of Navigation. We've looked at the Law of Navigation in day 1, and that although anyone can steer the ship, it takes a leader to chart the course. We took a dive into Nehemiah's story that's recorded in the book of the Bible that's named after him, and we made some thoughts there in from chapter 1 and chapter 2. So we then on Tuesday we looked at the issue of the burden of Nehemiah. Today we're going to jump in again on day number 3 and just continue to dive deeply into this story of this wonderful leader. I hope that you've been encouraged in these first 2 days, and that today will just be more of the same of learning from Nehemiah. So with that, again, just for review, the Law of Navigation says that anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. So our leadership thought for today follows the carpenter's rule. I think some of you probably know what this is, but in case you don't, the carpenter's rule says, measure twice, saw once. Again, measure twice, saw once. So let's look at Nehemiah, the navigator. Nehemiah is rightfully considered one of the great planners and leaders in the Bible. He could be called Nehemiah, the navigator. If you look at the way he approached the planning of the rebuilding project, you can learn a lot from the way he did things. Before the actual building began, Nehemiah spent time getting himself and his people ready. So we're going to look at an 8-step process and just make some points with each of these 8 steps. Not in depth, of course, we don't have the time for that. But let me list these 8 points, and then we'll take a look at each one of them and just share a couple of comments about each one. So here is Nehemiah's navigation process. First, he identified with the problem. Then he spent time in prayer. He then approached the key influencers. When he went to Jerusalem, he assessed the situation personally. After that, he met with the people and cast the vision. He encouraged them with past successes. He then received buy-in from the people. And finally, he organized the people and got them working. So again, real quickly, he identified with the problem. He spent time in prayer. He approached the key influencers. He assessed the situation. He met with the people and cast the vision. He encouraged them with past successes. He received buy-in from the people. And then he organized the people and got them working. So let's look at each one of these in just a little bit more depth. Nehemiah got information from his brother and some others who had come from Jerusalem. And note in the text that he asked questions of them in regard to the status of Jerusalem and the people living around there. So he not only kind of heard their report, but he also asked follow-up questions. He wanted to get to know the situation as it really was in as much detail as he could. Then upon hearing the report, it's obvious that Nehemiah was touched very deeply, because the record says that Nehemiah wept and he fasted and he prayed over the situation. With the wall being a heap of rubble, the people in great trouble and disgrace, and perhaps most importantly, the name of Israel's God mocked. In other words, their problem became Nehemiah's problem. Then secondly, he spent time in prayer. Nehemiah both prayed over the situation. He confessed his personal and family sins and even the corporate sins that caused the walls to be broken down and the city to be attacked in the first place. He then reminds God that the people of Israel are still his covenant people. Third, he finally asks for favor with the king. This is all in chapter 1. So I just have a question that we don't have to try to answer, but it just makes me wonder. And here's the question. Could it be that this season of prayer and fasting produced the vision and the plan to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem? Can't say for sure, but I have a sneaky suspicion that it was the season of prayer and fasting and calling on God and seeking Him that then produced not only the vision for rebuilding the walls, but also the plan that would make it happen. Just a thought. So after spending the season of prayer, he then approached the key influencers. He prayed that God would give him favor with the king. Then Nehemiah looked for the right opportunity. And when it came, he again sought God in prayer, and then he addressed the king. Now, what's interesting is that Nehemiah not only got permission from the king to rebuild the wall, but he also received material support and other resources as well. So after Nehemiah made this trip, and the trip itself was certainly not a piece of cake, going hundreds of miles, but he finally arrived in Jerusalem. And when he got there, the Bible tells us in the book of Nehemiah that he conducted a personal assessment of the situation before recruiting others to join him. This personal assessment provided him with insight into how extensive the damage was and to devise a plan to rebuild. This personal assessment allowed Nehemiah to develop a plan without unwanted interference or advice from other people. After he devised this plan, then and only then he met with the people and cast a vision. So at some point after this personal inspection of the walls, Nehemiah met with the key people and shared his vision with them, including the spiritual ramifications of the project. And as he's in the process of encouraging the people and casting the vision, he makes sure to mention to them two really important things. Number one is that he had gained God's blessing. God had orchestrated that all of these things would be provided, all these resources, and also the king's favor and the provision of those resources. So the people were clearly able to see that God was in it. They were clearly able to see that Nehemiah had the blessing of the king. That, of course, provided motivation and encouragement for the people. Excuse me. This then led to the people buying in. Following the vision casting and the testimony regarding favor with God and the king, the people verbalized that they had bought into Nehemiah's vision and plan. Keep in mind that the walls had been left in disrepair for 120 years. So some of the people had day after day, all of their life, had seen these walls broken down, destroyed, and had not had the slightest motivation to do something about it. But Nehemiah did. And after seeking God's blessing and the king's favor, developing a vision and a plan, the people were ready to buy in. So here's a key point to leave with you on this point about buy-in. Followers must buy in to the leader's vision and the plan before they will wholeheartedly follow through with action. So if you want to get people to rally around your vision and your plan, they must buy into it first. in order for them to, and here's the key word, wholeheartedly follow through with action. Then finally, he organized them and created a plan for carrying out the work. I love how he does this. When you dive deeply into the book of Nehemiah, you see that many references where he organized them by family, and he gave them a certain section of the wall, but it wasn't just a random selection of what part of the wall they were going to rebuild. In fact, often the section that he assigned to a particular family was close by where they lived. So it was around their homes. So think about the motivation that they had already, but then you combine that with the fact that he assigned each family according to where they already lived, and you can see why they were even that much more motivated to do the job with excellence. And so that brings us to our conclusion for today. John Maxwell writes in the book 21 Most Powerful Minutes in a Leader's Day, and I hope that several of you, by the way, have picked this book up and the supporting book, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. This study is based on these two books, as you know. So by way of conclusion, a lot of work went into Nehemiah's approach to realizing his vision. He was a great leader of people, but without careful planning, the wall never would have been built. So this leads us up to our question of the day for reflection. Are you ready? Here it goes. Do you make your plan before you make your move? Let me ask that one more time. Do you make your plan before you make your move? With that, again, we thank you so much for joining us and pray that these studies add value to you and that you see an enhancement in your personal life and in your leadership life. We ask, of course, for God's blessing on each and every one of you. Thank you for joining with us each and every day. God bless you.